Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about Universal's 1925 silent film adaptation of Phantom of the Opera. And the film begins with a production at the Paris Opera House. In the audience is Vicomte Raoul de Chagny, there to watch his paramour, Christine Daae, perform. Raoul wants Christine to leave the opera to get married to him. Christine, however, prefers to focus on her career, and she even goes so far as to claim that she has been tutored by a mysterious voice, the spirit of music, and it is now impossible for her to leave her career. Raoul finds this idea preposterous, of course, but perhaps he should have spoken to the former owners of the opera, who believe the building has a ghost, a phantom who is the occupant of box number 5. Christine's spirit and this phantom are, of course, one and the same being, and it seems the phantom has very firm opinions about Christine's talent. The opera's current leading lady, Carlotta, as well as its new owners, both receive mysteriously delivered threatening letters warning that if Christine is not made the star of Faust, dire consequences will befall them. And it soon emerges that the Phantom does not make empty threats. When Carlotta defiantly ignores his demands, he drops a chandelier into the audience, killing several people. Unaware of her spirit's violent crimes, Christine visits him in the catacombs beneath the opera house. The masked phantom is charming and has the voice of an angel, but he warns Christine that she must never look underneath his mask. Which, of course, is exactly like giving Pandora a box and telling her not to open it. Christine, of course, does remove the phantom's mask, revealing his hideously disfigured features beneath. With his true face revealed, the Phantom no longer feels the need to conceal the uglier side of his passion for this young ingenue. So this is the oldest surviving screen adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera. The only older adaptation, a 1916 film made in Germany, has been entirely lost. Universal president Carl Laemmle read the Phantom novel in 1922 and immediately optioned it as a vehicle for his star, the man of a thousand faces, Lon Chaney. When the movie finally began filming in October 1924, it proved to be a difficult production. Chaney quickly fell out with director Rupert Julian, and it seems many of the cast and crew shared Chaney's low opinion of the director's ability. A test audience in January 1925 also scorned Julian's work. He left the production, it's not clear whether he jumped or was pushed, as further filming was hurriedly scheduled to try and repair the apparent flop. It didn't help. A second test screening was literally booed by the audience. This time, the production company's savage approach was to cut and cut some more, dropping almost a quarter of the runtime of the whole film and all of the newly shot material. This third version of the movie officially debuted in New York on September 6th, 1925, almost exactly 100 years ago today, and finally received a mostly positive, if not exactly gushing, reaction. The decades since have seen the movie's critical star rise, and in 1998 it was added to the United States National Film Registry, having been deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. But what did I think? Well, I like that this is probably the most faithful screen adaptation of the novel. Details are changed, but the overall thrust and tone is in keeping with that of the book. This is an important thing to note, as later works tended to draw on and extend elements introduced in the 1943 version of the film, starring Claude Rains. The Phantom's deformity being the result of an injury, for instance, is an invention of the World War II era film. In this movie and in the book, he has been disfigured since birth. Now, that specific detail isn't in and of itself a big deal, but it is symptomatic of a wider tonal shift. Later adaptations have cast the Phantom in a more and more sympathetic/tragic anti-hero role. Make no mistake, though, in the original book and in this film, he's most definitely a villain. He murders those who threaten to reveal him and uses the threat of further violence to try and force a woman to marry him, despite knowing that she loves another. I do wonder if, ironically, given the word opera in the title, it was easier to make the Phantom wicked back in 1925 because this is a silent film. We're told the Phantom has the voice of an angel, but of course we only ever see his face and his actions, both of which are repellent. If he was just a beautiful disembodied voice for the first act, as he is in later screen and stage adaptations, we might well be more sympathetic to him when he finally appears, and the temptation arises to soften his role in the story. Given how toxic his actual actions are, though, I think that softening him is somewhat problematic. But that is a problem this film doesn't have. A problem it does have, though, is that even after they cut a quarter of its original length for the final theatrical release, it still felt a bit too long to me. And I'm not the only one who felt that way, it seems. Universal's own 1929 reissue of the film, which added a new synchronized score and sound effects track, as well as a few new bits of dialogue, spoken dialogue, chopped a further 13 minutes off the runtime, and there are two other even shorter versions of the movie now available. Despite that, though, I don't think that the problem is the film's actual length. At 107 minutes, including credits, it's hardly Peter Jackson-esque in its runtime. The reason it feels long is not that it is long, but it is structural. The film's first act, which is all about atmosphere and establishing the mysterious antagonist from which it takes its name, is a grand romp, culminating in the Red Death scene, about which more later. But when the film has to shift gears to go from atmosphere to something a bit more concrete, it gets a bit bogged down in explaining its mysterious phantom and his schemes. The pace notably flags, and it feels like the movie starts to run out of steam a bit. This was particularly notable to me in the climactic sequence, which I found particularly drawn out. It is interesting to note that the finale was a part of the film the studio had the most problems with during production. There were a number of rewrites and reshoots of this part of the movie, and I don't think they ever quite got it right. But that's not to say that the film is entirely without merit. As a piece of visual media, in particular, it does a lot of things right, which is a real strength, since silent films are, if anything, a much more purely visual medium than today's movies. The unmasking of the Phantom in this movie, for instance, is considered one of the great moments of cinematic horror. Lon Chaney's self-devised makeup was reportedly so unexpectedly repellent that the camera operator actually lost focus on the shot, and newspapers of the time reported women fainting in their theatre seats. Now, I'm dubious of those claims myself, and I don't think that a modern audience will find much to disgust or terrify them here. It's certainly no more gross than some of the things in the Lord of the Rings movies, for instance. But it is undoubtedly impressive makeup work that Lon Chaney produced, because he did all of his own makeup work. And the film also has other striking visual components. The use of shadow is strong, for instance, and then there's the Red Death scene I mentioned earlier. This takes place at a masquerade ball where the Phantom appears in a skull-faced costume. Some images from the film are on your screen right now. This entire sequence was produced in an early form of Technicolor. It's a clever piece of production, creating a real sense of opulence to the party and underlying the narrative heft that this sequence does hold in the film. Still, ultimately, I'd say this movie is principally of interest to film history buffs. The average modern movie viewer is likely to find it too slow-paced to entertain, but if you do want to check it out, it's in the public domain and freely accessible online in varying versions of wildly different picture quality, so try and find one like the one I took these screen grabs from that is in pretty good nick. Next time, while I lost all interest in the main John Wick storyline after the third film and will likely never see John Wick 4, I was intrigued enough by the idea of the franchise spin-off Ballerina to check that movie out. I'll talk about the good and bad parts of the experience next week. But that is next time. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you've seen the 1925 Phantom of the Opera, let me know what you thought of it.